He didn't just break my heart, he broke my life, turning my dreams into a public humiliation. I vowed that my pain would be my weapon, and my revenge would be spectacular. I found my perfect tool, his greatest rival. I planned to use him, manipulate him, and discard him. But what happens when the man you meant to destroy your enemy with becomes the only person who can heal your soul? My revenge became my greatest risk, and my manipulation became my first true love. My life, before the betrayal, was a perfectly crafted illusion. I was Sora, a woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in her future with Dongmin, a man whose ambition was matched only by his arrogance. We were engaged, our wedding plans finalized, our careers intertwined. I believed in him, invested my time, my savings, and my reputation into his budding business empire. The public betrayal was a shockwave that didn't just shatter my heart, it demolished my world. He didn't just leave me, he left me for a business rival, publicly humiliating me at a major industry event, effectively ending my career and leaving me financially ruined. The shame was suffocating, a heavy velvet cloak of humiliation that made it impossible to face the light. I fell into a deep, dark despair, a place where the sun never shone and the silence was only broken by the sound of my own quiet sobs. The world blurred into a muted landscape of gray. For weeks, I barely moved, barely spoke, consumed by a pain that felt physical, corrosive, and all-consuming. But then, in the lowest pit of my agony, a cold, hard ember of clarity ignited. My pain would not be my end, it would be my weapon. The desire for justice, for a restoration of my dignity, morphed into a cold, singular focus: revenge. I vowed that Dongmin would pay, not with money, which he could easily replace, but with the one thing he valued above all else: his pride and his untouchable reputation. I needed to strike him where it hurt the most. I needed to see his empire crumble, his arrogance shattered, and his public standing reduced to dust. This was no longer about love lost. This was about justice seized. My mission was clear, my heart was encased in ice, and the ghost of the woman who loved him was gone, replaced by a strategist focused only on the destruction of my enemy. The feeling was intoxicating, a dangerous burning fuel that pulled me out of my despair and gave me a terrifying new purpose. I would not just survive, I would conquer. My search for the perfect weapon against Dongmin led me straight to his most irritating and consistent thorn, Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo was not a rival in wealth or public flashiness, but in quiet, unyielding integrity and strategic intelligence, everything Dongmin lacked. He was Dongmin's former business partner, who had left the company after a massive ethical dispute, taking with him his reputation and a core group of loyal investors. Now, Hyunwoo ran a smaller, highly ethical investment firm that quietly outperformed Dongmin's flashy, often precarious ventures. He was known for his reserved nature, his focus on long-term sustainability, and a quiet, unassuming kindness that stood in stark contrast to Dongmin's volatile arrogance. He was the perfect target. Getting close to Hyunwoo would not only grant me access to information that could ruin Dongmin, but the mere appearance of me on Hyunwoo's arm would be a catastrophic blow to Dongmin's overinflated ego. My plan was meticulous, cold, and entirely focused on manipulation. I would orchestrate a fated meeting, make Hyunwoo fall for the carefully constructed persona I would present, and use that trust to glean the information I needed. Once Dongmin was ruined, I would discard Hyunwoo, who was merely a tool in my revenge plot, a necessary means to an end. My heart was a stone, impervious to any notion of genuine connection. I spent weeks researching Hyunwoo, his routines, his interests, his vulnerabilities. I learned about his quiet passion for classic films, his visits to a specific, unassuming jazz club, and his commitment to local charities. I tailored my own appearance, my conversations, and my schedule to flawlessly align with his. The woman he would meet would be charming, intelligent, successful in her own right, and crucially, vulnerable. A survivor discreetly putting her life back together after an unnamed tragedy. I practiced my expressions, my tone, and my calculated size. I had become an actress, my entire existence dedicated to this one, singular performance. There was no room for error, no room for emotion, and absolutely no room for the genuine connection that I had sworn off forever. The orchestrated meeting with Hyunwoo was a masterpiece of planning. It happened at the jazz club, a quiet, smoky corner where he often went alone. I managed a seemingly accidental brush of hands, a shared comment on the music, and a quick, compelling introduction. He was initially reserved exactly as my research had indicated, but his eyes were kind, and I saw a quiet intelligence there that intrigued the real Sora, the woman I had buried. I immediately went into character, presenting the facade of a successful woman. I spoke confidently about business and design, using all the knowledge I gained working with Dongmin, who carried a delicate sadness from a painful past relationship. I made sure to never mention Dongmin, only hinting at the devastation caused by a former partner. Hyunwoo was incredibly observant, not falling for cheap flattery but drawn in by the calculated vulnerability I displayed. He was patient, listening more than he spoke, and offering thoughtful, genuine responses that were deeply unsettling to the strategist in me. Every interaction was a calculated move. I needed to build trust quickly. I accepted his invitations to dinner, ensuring our conversations always returned to business ethics, his firm's struggles with competitors, a subtle avenue for Dongmin's information, and philosophical discussions that highlighted my supposed moral alignment with him. But beneath the cold calculation, a disturbing realization began to take root. Hyunwoo was genuinely good. His respect was real. His support was authentic. He was drawn to the mask I wore, but he treated the woman beneath it with a respect I hadn't received in years, not even from Dongmin in our best moments. I had to continually remind myself that he was a means to an end, a tool. Yet the emotional distance I had maintained was dangerously close to closing. I found myself looking forward to his calls, not for the information he might inadvertently reveal, but for the quiet peace his presence provided. The emotional ice around my heart began to crack, threatening to reveal the vulnerability I had sworn to protect. This was the most terrifying realization of all. My revenge plot was succeeding, but my heart was defecting. As our relationship accelerated, my plan was working flawlessly. Our public appearances began to create the desired ripple effect in Seoul's small, tight-knit business community. We were seen at galas, business dinners, and quiet, exclusive restaurants. The visual juxtaposition of the arrogant, loud Dongmin losing his former fiancé to the quiet, dignified Hyunwoo was a public relations nightmare for my ex. The reports of his jealousy, his sudden, frantic calls to mutual acquaintances, and his rising paranoia were music to my ears. I reveled in the delicious, icy satisfaction of seeing him suffer, even from a distance. The revenge felt sweet, a tangible retribution for the months of silent suffering he had inflicted upon me. I intentionally placed myself in situations where Dongmin would be forced to witness our connection, savoring the subtle twitch in his jaw, the look of possessive fury in his eyes. This was the moment of victory for the vengeful Sora. Simultaneously, the information-gathering phase of my plan was nearing completion. Hyunwoo, now trusting me implicitly, had inadvertently given me access to several sensitive documents and discussions regarding Dongmin's precarious business maneuvers. I had concrete evidence of his unethical, potentially illegal dealings, a smoking gun that could bring down his empire overnight. The power was intoxicating. I held his entire future in my hands. Yet the closer I got to the final act, the harder it became to reconcile the planned destruction with the growing reality of my feelings for Hyunwoo. He had become more than a tool. He had become a safe harbor. He listened to my real professional frustrations, supported my old, buried career goals, and treated me with an unwavering, genuine respect that made my heart ache with a foreign emotion: peace. His laughter was gentle, his touch was respectful, and his presence was a quiet, constant balm. I found myself pushing away the vengeful thoughts, dreading the moment the final plan would be executed, not because of Dongmin, but because I knew the detonation would destroy my relationship with the only man who had seen the kindness buried beneath my anger. The internal battle was tearing me apart, a tug-of-war between the righteous fury of revenge and the terrifying, fragile hope of a real, honest love. The moral crisis intensified, threatening to shatter the meticulously crafted fortress of my revenge. I was sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the screen, where the damning evidence against Dongmin was neatly compiled: financial irregularities, blatant ethical violations, and confidential emails. A single click of the mouse, an anonymous leak, and Dongmin's ruin would be swift and absolute. I should have felt exhilarated, triumphant, but instead a profound, chilling emptiness washed over me. The planned revenge, once my singular focus, now felt hollow, small, and utterly pointless. I realized with a devastating clarity that revenge would never heal my wounds. It would only create a new, deeper one: the loss of Hyunwoo. The thought of executing the plan was inseparable from the thought of destroying the trust in his kind, honest eyes. I knew that the truth, that I had deliberately manipulated him, that our entire connection was built on a lie to facilitate my personal vendetta, would annihilate him, and in doing so, annihilate the one truly good thing that had entered my life after the betrayal. The weight of this realization was crushing. I spent hours wrestling with the moral ambiguity. Could I truly be happy with a man I had deceived so profoundly? Could I look him in the eye every day, knowing our foundation was built on my cold calculation? The answer was a resounding, painful no. I reached out to click the send button, ready to release the information, when a text message from Hyunwoo arrived. "Thinking of you. Don't forget your strength. Call me." It was a simple, innocent message, but it was enough. I pulled back my hand, my heart pounding wildly. The vengeful Sora wanted to destroy Dongmin, but the real Sora wanted to protect Hyunwoo. My love for him was the unexpected variable, the wrench in the gears of my perfect plot. I deleted the files, physically scrubbing the evidence from my devices, a symbolic act of choosing love and self-preservation over the corrosive poison of vengeance. The desire for revenge was powerful, but the fear of losing Hyunwoo was overwhelming. I was trapped, unable to hurt Dongmin without hurting the one I loved, and unable to move forward without confessing the massive deception that stood between us. The emotional pressure cooker finally exploded, not with a planned revenge, but with an unplanned, desperate confrontation. Hyunwoo, perceptive and intuitive, sensed the profound conflict and the heavy secret I was carrying. My forced smiles were faltering, my conversation was becoming evasive, and I was perpetually distracted. He confronted me one evening, his voice gentle but firm, in the quiet sanctuary of his apartment. "Sora," he said, holding my gaze with his steady eyes, "something is wrong. I see the pain, and I see the fear. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone, but I need you to be honest with me, please." His sincere, unwavering kindness was my undoing. I couldn't bear to lie to him, yet I couldn't bear to tell him the whole, horrifying truth, that I was a manipulator, that our beautiful connection was initially a calculated trap. Tears streamed down my face, and the dam I had built around my pain finally broke. I confessed to the partial truth, a desperate attempt to save both my sanity and his respect. I told him that our relationship had started under false pretenses, admitting that I was using him, not for revenge, but to quickly establish a new public image of success and stability after my devastating breakup with my ex. I admitted that I was using his reputation and his company to gain visibility and to make my ex jealous. I confessed to carrying a massive secret that was consuming me, a secret related to my profound shame over the public betrayal. I didn't reveal the specific revenge plot or the information I had on Dongmin. I couldn't. The fear of seeing his complete disillusionment was too great. Hyunwoo was visibly hurt, the initial shock on his face quickly replaced by a profound disappointment that was far more painful than any anger he could have directed at me. He listened silently to my tearful, disjointed confession, his jaw tight. "Sora," he finally said, his voice low and heavy. "I understand pain. I understand desperation. But starting something real with a calculated lie, that's a betrayal of trust. The woman I fell in love with, I thought she was real. I need time. I need to know if the woman beneath the mask is capable of honesty." He granted me the space and time he needed, a quiet, devastating request that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I left his apartment, the silence in my ears deafening, but with a terrifying realization. I had wounded him, but I hadn't destroyed him. I had confessed the surface lie, but the core truth, the revenge plot, remained a dangerous secret, still capable of tearing us apart. The healing could only begin once the final, brutal truth was exposed. The public domain soon felt the tremor of Dongmin's collapse, an event I had engineered but ultimately chose to moderate. The conflict in my heart, the battle between the satisfaction of destroying Dongmin and the need to protect Hyunwoo, culminated in an act of quiet, focused self-vindication. I realized that true revenge wasn't about the spectacle of his downfall, which would only feed my bitterness, but about destroying the part of myself that he had poisoned. I couldn't release the damning financial evidence publicly. It would immediately implicate Hyunwoo, even indirectly, due to the sensitive nature of the information and our relationship. Instead, I anonymously leaked the evidence, not to a gossip blog or a newspaper, but directly to the proper regulatory body and to a specific group of investors Dongmin was actively exploiting. I sacrificed the satisfying public scream of revenge for a quiet, moral victory. I ensured that the release was untraceable and that no part of the documentation could be linked back to Hyunwoo's firm or to me. The damage to Dongmin was effective. His empire began to crumble under official scrutiny, but it lacked the immediate public humiliation I had initially craved. It was a cold, calculated move, driven by the purest form of love I knew, self-sacrifice. I wasn't doing it for justice. I was doing it to preserve the one beautiful, innocent thing that had survived my pain. The fallout was immediate but contained. Dongmin's world fractured, but the narrative in the public eye was about financial mismanagement, not a scandalous personal plot. I had saved Hyunwoo's reputation and my own integrity, but this act of self-redemption came with its own price. I distanced myself entirely, cutting off all contact with Hyunwoo, knowing I had to let him heal from the partial lie I had confessed. I took the opportunity to finally pursue my own creative ambitions, starting a small, independent design consultancy. My life was finally mine, rebuilt on honesty and hard work, not on revenge. The silence from Hyunwoo was a constant, aching reminder of the cost of my past actions, but I endured it, knowing that the moral choice, though painful, was the right choice. I was no longer the vengeful strategist. I was simply Sora, a woman trying to rebuild her life with integrity. Dongmin, predictably, was furious. His crumbling world, coupled with his paranoia, led him to the only conclusion his narcissistic mind could fathom. Hyunwoo was behind it. He orchestrated a final, dramatic confrontation, cornering me and Hyunwoo at a public event. He was desperate, volatile, and driven by a need to expose the whole truth, regardless of the consequences. was. You think you won, Sora? He spat, his eyes wild with rage. You used him. You manipulated him. You planned to destroy me from the moment you met him, didn't you, Hyunwoo? She confessed it all. She was using you, you fool. The words hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. The full, ugly truth, the part I had carefully concealed, was suddenly and brutally exposed. Hyunwoo's gaze immediately snapped to mine, his eyes wide with a devastating mix of shock, hurt, and betrayal. The earlier disappointment was nothing compared to this profound realization. He saw the whole picture now, the fake vulnerability, the calculated moves, the strategic timing. I stood silent, unable to deny the truth, the shame consuming me entirely. Dongmin, savoring the destruction he had wrought, continued his tirade, but his words faded into a meaningless background noise. I looked only at Hyunwoo, my own tears streaming down my face. When Dongmin finally paused, I spoke, my voice raw and broken, but unwavering. It's true, Hyunwoo, I confessed, finally, completely. It started as revenge. I was going to destroy him publicly with the information I found, but I didn't. I sacrificed the revenge. I chose to save the company and the people he was exploiting anonymously, so his destruction wouldn't implicate you. I chose to protect your integrity over my vengeance. I chose to lose him. I gestured toward Dongmin, who was now stunned into silence, and risk losing you, because by the time I had the power to destroy him, I loved you more than I hated him. The air was thick with tension. Dongmin stormed off, realizing he had only succeeded in proving my love for his rival. I stood there utterly exposed, my future entirely in Hyunwoo's hands. I had finally told the whole truth. Hyunwoo didn't speak. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the aftermath of my final, complete confession. I didn't try to stop him. I knew I had to let him go, to give him the space and the time to process the entirety of my betrayal. The months that followed were characterized by a profound, heavy silence. I focused entirely on my independent design consultancy, pouring all my energy into building a life founded on integrity and hard work. My business grew, slowly but steadily, a testament to the fact that I was no longer defined by Dongmin's shadow or my vengeful past. I had achieved self-redemption, a quiet victory that felt more meaningful than any public downfall could have ever been. Yet, the absence of Hyunwoo was a constant, aching void. I missed his quiet humor, his unwavering support, and the feeling of peace he brought to my turbulent life. I had risked everything and lost the most important thing. I was finally free, but alone. Then months later, an unexpected email appeared in my inbox. It was from Hyunwoo. The subject line was simple, the jazz club. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this was the moment. The email contained only a simple request, to meet where we first accidentally met. I arrived at the quiet, smoky club, trembling with nervousness, and saw him sitting alone at the same small table. He was thinner, perhaps, but his eyes still held that same quiet, steady intelligence. We talked for hours, not about the past, but about the intervening months, about our work, and about the growth we had both experienced. He spoke of his struggle to reconcile the manipulative strategist with the woman who had sacrificed her revenge to protect him. I realized, he said, his voice soft, that your final choice, that moment you chose love and protection over the complete, satisfying destruction of your enemy, that was the true you. That was the real measure of your heart. That's the woman I fell in love with. He reached across the table, his hand gently covering mine. We can't undo the beginning, Sora, but we can build a new foundation, one based entirely on the truth. His forgiveness was not a cheap, easy waiver. It was a profound act of grace, a recognition of my complete transformation. We started over, a slow, gentle courtship built on honesty, vulnerability, and a love that had survived betrayal, revenge, and complete exposure. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a real, raw, and deeply human journey of healing, redemption, and the extraordinary power of a love born from the ashes of a calculated, failed revenge. Thank you for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel for a new episode every day. We'll be waiting for you. See you in the next story.